First contact. The crystalline landscapes of Lumara shimmered under the double moonlight as Dr. Elian Reyes stepped off the transport shuttle. 6 months of interstellar travel had left him weary, but the sight before him was worth every second of cryosleep. The research station, a sleek structure of curved metal and transparent panels, stood as humanity's lone outpost on this remote world. "Welcome to Outpost Horizon, Dr. Reyes," came a melodious voice from behind him. Elian turned to find himself face to face with a woman whose features immediately captivated him. Her skin held a subtle iridescent quality that caught the moonlight, her movements fluid and graceful as she extended her hand in the human greeting she had clearly practiced. "I am Naya Teldrin, your liaison between station operations and my people," she said, her accent giving the words an almost musical quality. "Please, call me Elian," he replied, taking her hand. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through his fingers. Naya smiled, revealing a row of perfectly aligned teeth. "Your journey was satisfactory, Elian? The void between stars can be lonely." The way she said lonely resonated with something inside him. After his bitter divorce and the subsequent professional exile to this distant assignment, loneliness had become his constant companion. "It was uneventful, which is the best one can hope for in deep space travel," he replied, following her into the station. The next few days were a blur of orientation and preliminary research. Elian discovered that Naya was not merely a cultural liaison, but a brilliant xenobotanist in her own right. They worked side by side in the laboratory, studying the bioluminescent flora that made Lumara so valuable to Earth's medical research. "These specimens respond to emotional energy," Naya explained one evening as they cataloged samples. She was standing close enough that Elian could detect the faint scent of something like vanilla and starlight. "They grow more luminous when exposed to certain feelings." As if responding to her words, the plant between them pulsed brighter. Elian wondered if it was reacting to his quickening heartbeat. Their work was interrupted by a sudden alarm. The station's AI announced, "Warning! Class 3 solar flare detected. Radiation shielding engaged. All personnel proceed to interior chambers." "The cleansing facility," Naya said urgently, grabbing Elian's hand. "It's the most protected space." They rushed through corridors as lights flickered ominously. The cleansing chamber, essentially the station's communal showering facility, was indeed surrounded by the thickest walls, designed to contain water and provide privacy. As the door sealed behind them, Elian became acutely aware of the intimate space they now shared. Steam lingered from recent use, creating a misty atmosphere that softened Naya's already ethereal appearance. "We may be here for some time," she said, seemingly untroubled by their proximity. "In my world, shared spaces like this are common. Does this make you uncomfortable?" He swallowed hard. "Not uncomfortable, just unaccustomed." Naya nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps this is our first true cultural exchange," she said, her eyes meeting his with innocent curiosity that belied the tension building within him. Outside, the storm raged across Lumaris's atmosphere, but inside the small chamber, a different kind of electricity was beginning to spark. Cultural exchange. 3 weeks into his assignment, Elian found himself increasingly distracted by Nanaya's presence in the laboratory. Her natural grace as she moved between specimens, the thoughtful tilt of her head when analyzing data, and her uninhibited joy at new discoveries all contributed to his growing fascination. "You seem troubled today," Nanaya observed one morning as they prepared equipment for field research. "Your energy is discordant." Elian smiled despite himself. The Lumarian's sensitivity to emotional states was both a blessing and a curse. "Just some research complications, nothing serious." "Perhaps you need Lumeris's healing," Nanaya suggested, her expression brightening. "Tomorrow marks the lunar alignment, a time when our healing springs reach their peak potency. Would you join me for the purification ritual? It would be educational for your cultural reports." Before he could formulate a professional excuse, Elian heard himself accepting. The next evening, Nanaya led him along a crystalline path to a secluded grotto where steam rose from pools of milky blue water. The air smelled of minerals and something like cinnamon. The springs contain trace elements found nowhere else in the galaxy, Nanaya explained, beginning to unfasten her field uniform with casual ease. They remove toxins and restore balance. Elian froze, suddenly understanding what a purification ritual entailed. Nanaya noticed his hesitation and smiled reassuringly. "Is communal bathing not practiced among your people?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Not commonly," Elian managed, grateful for the dim lighting that concealed his flushed face. Nanaya nodded, understandingly. "There are private pools as well," she said, gesturing to smaller springs partially concealed by crystalline formations, though sharing waters strengthens connections. Elian opted for adjacent pools rather than shared ones, a compromise that seemed to satisfy Nanaya's cultural expectations while preserving his composure. The warm, mineralized water immediately soothed muscles tense from weeks of research and emotional restraint. From her nearby pool, Nanaya spoke softly about Lumarian traditions. "These waters revealed truth between people," she said. "My ancestors believed they dissolved barriers, not just physical impurities, but emotional walls as well." Later, as they prepared to return to the station, Nanaya approached with a small jar of pearlescent salve. "This protects the skin after exposure to the minerals. May I?" Before Elian could respond, her fingers were applying the cool substance to his shoulders with gentle circular motions. Her touch was professional yet intimate, leaving trails of warmth that had nothing to do with the salve's properties. "Your research has brought you far from your world," Nanaya murmured as she worked. "Do you miss Earth's connections? A mate, perhaps?" "No mate," Elian replied, his voice unexpectedly hoarse. "My work became everything." Nanaya's hands paused momentarily on his shoulders. "Work fulfills the mind, but not the spirit," she said softly, her breath warm against his neck. "Lumarians believe balance requires both." As they walked back under Lumaris's twin moons, Elian wondered if he imagined the lingering touch as Nanaya completed the ritual, or the way her eyes seemed to reflect more than just starlight when they said goodnight.
Hidden desires. "Station environmental controls compromised," announced the AI with mechanical calm. "Temperature regulation exceeding optimal parameters by 7 degrees. Elian wiped sweat from his brow as he worked alongside the engineering team. 5 days of increasingly uncomfortable heat had transformed the research station into a tropical environment. Most staff had adapted by modifying their attire, including Naya, who had exchanged her standard uniform for a light, flowing garment typical of her people. "The thermal coils require recalibration," Naya said, handing him a diagnostic tool. Her fingers brushed his, lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "I've requested parts from the central settlement, but they won't arrive for 3 days." Elian nodded, trying not to notice how the heat had brought a glow to Naya's skin or how her more traditional attire revealed the elegant curve of her shoulders. "We'll manage," he said, focusing intently on the diagnostic readings. That evening, exhausted from battling both the station's technical issues and his own thoughts, Elian collapsed onto his bunk. Sleep came quickly, but brought dreams so vivid they seemed real. Images of crystal pools, blue light, and Naya's hands tracing patterns across his skin. He woke with a start to find Naya herself at his door, her expression uncharacteristically troubled. "You were in my dreams," she said without preamble. "You were calling to me through the veil of sleep." Elian sat up disoriented. I dreamed of you too." Naya entered his quarters, sitting beside him on the narrow bunk. "Dream sharing is rare among my people," she explained, her voice soft with wonder.
It only happens when minds seek each other across the unconscious realm, when spirits recognize their complementary nature. Is that a scientific observation or a cultural belief? Elian asked, trying to maintain professional distance despite their proximity. On Lumaris, the two are not always separate, Naya replied. Her hand moved to rest lightly on his. You've been studying our world, but resisting its most fundamental lesson, that connection between beings is as essential as the air we breathe. The following day, they were analyzing particularly reactive specimens in the laboratory's controlled environment chamber. The already warm room grew warmer as the plants responded to their presence, glowing with increasing intensity. They sense emotional energy, Naya explained, watching the luminescent patterns pulse in response to their movements. Particularly, attraction. The word hung in the air between them. Is that why they glow brighter when you're near them? Elian asked, attempting to deflect. Naya stepped closer. They glow brightest when we are near them, together. She placed her specimen beside his, and immediately both plants erupted in dazzling blue-white light.
The bridge between worlds. The molecular structure simply doesn't support your theory, Elian said, frustration edging his voice as he gestured to the holographic model rotating between them. 3 days had passed since their encounter in the bathing facility, 3 days of meaningful glances and accidental touches that left him increasingly distracted. Naya's expression hardened slightly. You're applying Earth-based assumptions to Lumarian biology. Our connection to these plants goes beyond conventional science. Connection doesn't change molecular reality, Elian countered, immediately regretting his dismissive tone. Naya stepped back, her usual warmth replaced by professional distance. Perhaps there are realities your instruments cannot measure, Dr. Reyes. The formal address stung worse than her disagreement. For the remainder of the day, they worked in uncomfortable silence, the tension affecting even the bioluminescent specimens, which dimmed noticeably. That evening, a station-wide announcement interrupted Elian's brooding solitude. Attention all personnel. Due to ongoing environmental system repairs, water conservation protocols are now in effect. Shared bathing facilities will operate on reduced capacity until further notice. Elian hesitated outside the bathing chamber, hearing water already running inside. He considered returning to his quarters, but knew postponing the inevitable conversation with Naya would only worsen matters. Taking a deep breath, he entered. Naya stood beneath one of the shower units, her back to the door, water streaming over her shoulders. She turned at the sound of his entrance, surprise flickering across her features before her expression became carefully neutral. "The conservation notice," Elian explained awkwardly. "I can come back later." "That would defeat the purpose of conservation," Naya replied, her voice softer than it had been in the lab. She moved slightly, creating space under the adjacent showerhead. "There's room for both of us." The practical logic was undeniable, though Elian suspected neither of them was thinking entirely rationally as he stepped under the water. They stood side by side, the narrow space forcing a proximity that made their earlier argument seem suddenly insignificant. "I spoke poorly today," Elian said finally, watching water trace patterns across the tiled floor between them. Naya turned toward him, droplets clinging to his eyelashes. "And I was too quick to dismiss empirical evidence. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between our perspectives." The simple wisdom of her statement and the parallel to their personal situation wasn't lost on Elian. Wordlessly, he reached for the cleansing solution, offering it to her first, in a small gesture of reconciliation. "In my culture," Naya said, accepting it with a small smile, "sharing water is symbolic of shared truth." She hesitated, then asked, "On Earth, what does physical intimacy symbolize?" The directness of her question took Elian by surprise. "It depends," he answered carefully. "Sometimes nothing beyond physical pleasure. Sometimes everything. And between us?" Her question hung in the steamy air. Before he could answer, Naya moved closer, her hand rising to trace the contour of his jaw. "Is this correct?" she asked, her eyes searching his for confirmation. Elian found himself nodding, speech momentarily impossible as her fingers continued their exploratory path along his neck, shoulders, chest. Each touch ignited responses he couldn't hide. "Your heartbeat increases," she observed, with scientific curiosity mixed with something more personal. "As does mine." "Naya," he managed finally, catching her hand against his chest, "there are protocols, professional boundaries. Do these boundaries serve any purpose beyond keeping us apart?" she asked, the innocent directness of her question cutting through his rationalizations. "My people believe connections that form naturally should be honored, not suppressed." As if to emphasize her point, the lights flickered momentarily, a common occurrence since the environmental system malfunction, plunging them into brief darkness where only touch remained to orient them. When illumination returned, Elian found himself closer to Naya, his arms having instinctively encircled her during the darkness. Perhaps some boundaries exist to be reconsidered.
Harmonious convergence. Dawn broke over Lumaris's crystalline landscape, casting prismatic reflections through the research station's observation dome. Elian and Naya stood side by side before their research team, presenting findings that merged Lumarian intuitive knowledge with Earth's empirical methodology. The symbiotic relationship between Lumarian flora and emotional energy represents an entirely new paradigm in xenobiology, Elian explained, displaying molecular models that validated what weeks ago he would have dismissed as impossible. Naya stepped forward, and the healing properties Dr. Reyes has quantified could revolutionize treatment approaches throughout the galaxy. Their professional collaboration had evolved into something seamless and powerful. What remained unspoken before their colleagues was how their personal relationship had undergone a similar transformation. The Western crystal field should provide conclusive samples, Naya said later, as they prepared for a field expedition, though the terrain is unpredictable during lunar alignment. Elian nodded, double-checking their equipment. The comfortable silence between them spoke volumes about how far they had come from their awkward first encounters. Now, even silence carried meaning. The expedition began routinely, sample collection, measurements, documentation, but as they ventured deeper into the crystal fields, the landscape began to shift, massive formations rearranging themselves in response to the lunar gravitational pull, creating a labyrinth of reflective surfaces. "We should return to the transport," Elian suggested, noticing the rapidly changing environment. Before Naya could respond, a loud crack echoed through the field. The crystal platform beneath her feet began to tilt dramatically toward a chasm that hadn't existed moments before. Elian lunged forward, catching her arm as she slid toward the edge. For a terrifying moment, her weight pulled them both toward the precipice before he managed to brace against a stable formation and pull her to safety. They collapsed together on solid ground, breathing heavily, arms still intertwined. "That was," Naya began. "Too close," Elian finished, his voice unsteady, as he realized how quickly he might have lost her. Back at the station, the medical scan confirmed no serious injuries, though both were shaken by the close call. As night fell, Naya appeared at Elian's quarters, dressed in a ceremonial attire he hadn't seen before. "Today you preserved my life," she said simply. "Among my people, such an act creates a bond that must be honored. Will you join me for the ritual of renewal?" Elian followed her to a small chamber she had prepared with items from her homeland. Crystalline bowls, luminescent water, aromatic essences that filled the air with tranquility. "The ritual cleanses not just the body but the spirit," Naya explained, pouring the glowing water into the largest bowl. "It acknowledges that after facing mortality, we are reborn into deeper understanding." She guided him through the ceremony, the symbolic washing away of fear, the application of oils representing courage and clarity, and the exchange of truths spoken in soft voices. When the crystal shelf began to fall, Naya confessed as she traced patterns of scented oil across his shoulders, "My fear was not of death, but of separation from you." Elian closed his eyes, allowing himself to fully experience her touch without scientific analysis or professional restraint. "When I saw you falling," he responded, "nothing else mattered, not research, not career, not even my own safety." The ritual progressed, becoming increasingly intimate as layers of pretense fell away with the symbolic cleansing. Naya's hands moved with both reverence and desire, finding responses in Elian's body that transcended cultural differences.
On my world, she whispered, her lips close to his ear, we believe true connection harmonizes all aspects of being, intellectual, emotional, physical, spiritual. Elian philosophers have sought such harmony for millennia, Elian replied, drawing her closer until the distinction between ritual and embrace blurred entirely. Later, as Lumaris's twin moons cast dual shadows across the station, they lay together in contented silence. Elian traced the curve of Naya's shoulder, marveling at how familiar she now seemed despite her otherworldly origins. What happens when your research concludes? Naya asked, finally, giving voice to the question that had lingered unspoken between them. Will you return to Earth? Elian considered the life that awaited him there. Prestigious but empty, filled with academic recognition, but lacking the profound connection he had discovered light years from home. My official assignment has an end date, Elian acknowledged, but perhaps my journey on Lumaris is just beginning. Outside the window, the bioluminescent fields pulsed with gentle blue light, responding to the emotional energy that flowed between them, a visible manifestation of an invisible truth that neither science nor tradition alone could fully explain, but that together they were beginning to understand.